notice says there is no try. Sometimes try is all we got. But we try to stay in that higher vibration of love, don't we? And yet, it's almost impossible with everything going on in the world today, especially. And the media seems to want to pit us against each other all the time, whether it's political viewpoints or different choices that people have made. And I read the most encouraging, wonderful article. Some of you subscribe, I know, to Maria Shriver's Sunday morning newsletter, and we get it in the email every Sunday morning. And sometimes I usually just skim through it, but this week I read the first article on top. Was so wonderful. It was about a woman who was struggling Thanksgiving with going to her relatives because she knew that a lot of her relatives had different political viewpoints than she did. And she didn't know how she was going to survive Thanksgiving, especially when they started to talk about he who shall not be named. And you can insert whatever name you want into that because, the name I insert might be different than the name you insert. So you can see the problem right away. But then she had an idea. She was a photographer. And she decided to take her camera with her to Thanksgiving. And she started to take pictures of each of her family members. And as she was doing that, she realized how much she loved her family, both while she was taking the pictures and afterwards when she looked at the pictures. And I can really relate to that because, my family, we grew up with 5 sisters, and we're all very, very different. And, 2 of them are one political party, 2 are the other. And then there's my dear Down syndrome sister who just always comes and says, I love my sisters. She says that every time she's with us. I love my sisters. And when I see them, and when I see their pictures, or we meet on Zoom once a month, I think the same thing. I love my sisters. Even if some of them, think a little differently, make different choices, that's okay. And last week, our Course in Love class, we discussed the possibility, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it's possible that just maybe these last 2 years are forcing us to make a choice between fear and separation and oneness and unity. We're being forced to choose. What does it say in Scripture? This day, who do you serve this day? Oh, I'm really messing that up. It's from Deuteronomy. Choose this day whom you will serve. That's it. So we're all being forced, Are we going to live together in one, or are we constantly going to be at odds? And it's all about judgment. It's all about when I judge you or you judge me, it implies guilt. And it always involves rejection. None of us can ever measure up, can we? Anybody here measure up to perfection? If so, I'll gladly step aside and let you take over. I know I'll never measure up to that. And so who am I to inflict judgment and guilt and rejection on others? Who am I? And who is anyone to judge? And yet we do it all the time. So if you're comfortable, would you repeat one of my favorite affirmations? It's based on a television ad, only the ending is different. Help, I've fallen into judgment, but I can get up. Together, help, I've fallen into judgment, but I can get up. I love that one. I say it to myself all the time when I catch myself. And we do both the Course in Miracles and the Course in Love here at Unity. And the Course in Miracles says forgiveness is a pathway to peace. And it doesn't mean you condone anyone or any situation, but you let go of judgment and just choose to see it differently. And so my other affirmation that I follow that first one is, I could choose peace instead of this. Would you say that with me together? I could choose peace instead of this. One more time. I could choose peace instead of this. Hold that in your mind. I'm going to have you repeat it again later. Just accepting what is doesn't mean you have to like it, but taking away the judgment. And then any action you take, because it doesn't mean you don't do anything, but you now take action from that centered place of acceptance of what is and not judging, really in alignment with Spirit now, guided what to say and do. We create our life from our state of mind. And when our minds are insane, which I think the whole world has been insane, it's in judgment. And it reminds me, my son went to Australia and bought me a boomerang. And judgment is like a boomerang. When I throw it out there at you, what happens? Oops. Comes right back at me. My dad used to say, what goes around comes around. Did your dad say that? And Jesus said, don't judge or you'll be judged. You know, like that boomerang. Oops, where's it coming right around back at me? So repeat one more time. I could choose peace instead of this. Together. I could choose peace instead of this. And we're in judgment 24/7. I know I am from the time I wake up in the morning. I mean, I've always said, when you wake up in the morning, you say, good morning, God, or good God, it's morning. Which do you say? One is in judgment. And then I go to the refrigerator and I judge everything. Bad food, good food, bad food. And when you meet people, immediately you subconsciously assess, do I like these people or not? You're immediately into judgment. Or when you see something and it's something different, or you're not sure what it is, we immediately say, is this good or bad? Or you hear something you've never heard before. Maybe you don't understand it. Maybe it's a different viewpoint. And we immediately go into judgment. Is this good or bad? Do I like it or not? If you taste some M&Ms, you know it's good. And if you taste broccoli and kale, you might say bad, bad. You feel pain and you might say that's bad, I'm feeling pain. And you feel pleasure, and if you grew up in old-time religion, you know it's bad. Did you grow up with old-time religion? So first we have to clarify. Well, people always say, but I have to judge. I have to know if it's right or wrong, good or bad. Well, that's discernment. Discernment is different than judging. Every action has a consequence. And we discern whether that consequence is going to be the one that we want to go through right now. We discern, is that the way I want to go right now? What are the consequences of that? But there's no judgment in it of being good or bad, right or wrong. It's just the consequence. What's the best choice before me right now? In the book of John 7:24, we're told, don't judge by outer appearances. Judge by right judgment. Outer appearances is through the 5 senses. And that can be deceiving because we don't see the higher view. We don't see what's under it all. There was a commentary on the Course in Miracles that said, it's sort of embarrassing. Remember how many times you thought you knew all the facts you needed for judgment and how wrong you were? Isn't that embarrassing when you go stomping in somewhere and you realize you're wrong? Is there anyone who's not had that experience? Would you know how many times you merely thought you were right without ever realizing you were wrong? Oops. Why would you choose such an arbitrary basis for decision making? Wisdom is not judgment. It's the relinquishment of judgment. Altogether, no oops, oops, oh darn, oh darn. So this year with COVID and politics and the media pitting us against each other, whenever I've fallen into judgment, I've noticed some things about myself. I've lost my peace of mind. And for a time I can go into fear and anger and stress. And then when I do things, I'm not as efficient as I would be if I weren't in that state of mind. And I become drained and tired. One of my favorite Course in Miracles statements is, the strain of constant judgment is exhausting. Isn't it exhausting? Let's repeat that affirmation again. I could choose peace instead of this. Together, I could choose peace instead of this. One more time. I could choose peace instead of this. It's like I could have had a V8, you know. All I had to do was make a different choice. And Helen and Bill, the creators of the Course in Miracles, the two people that worked together and decided they didn't want to live in an office where people were never at peace with each other. And they chose to choose another way. They said no one has any idea of the tremendous release and deep peace that comes from meeting yourself and your brothers totally without judgment. Totally without judgment. Wow. And Bill, the week before he died, he told some friends that for the first time in his life, he realized he had totally forgiven everyone and everything. And he was totally outside of judgment. And he had never felt more peace. He'd made it to that peace that passes all understanding. Now, that doesn't mean you don't create boundaries. I always say just because I've forgiven someone doesn't mean I have to do lunch with them. We still have healthy boundaries. Avoid toxic people, of course. That doesn't mean you're judging them. You're just saying, the consequence of being with them is going to drain me. I choose another way. Together I could choose peace instead of this. Together I could choose peace instead of this. I could choose not to have my energy drained. I choose to bless them from afar, but bless them. Also, it's important, and it's a big one for all of us, especially the people we love. When you see them going off in a direction that you judge to be not the right direction for them, not to judge the divine plan for someone else, no matter what it looks like. Especially when we see someone homeless on the street. Maybe they're begging for money or something. And it's so important for us all not to judge. They could be expanding their consciousness in a way that we could never imagine. They could be a saint here to teach us to accept. They could be working out something, strengthening something. There was an interview yesterday, Michael and I were watching with a psychiatrist, Dr. Fred Moss. And it was so fascinating. He was talking about street people that we see and how they have literally lost everything. They've got nothing more to lose. And he said, you know what? He said, these people are free to self-express. And it just sort of struck me when he said that. They are free to self-express. And we might even resent it a little if they're ranting and raving or talking too loud, or maybe they're singing and dancing in the street. We might resent the freedom because we live in such restriction of rules, and oh, people will judge me if I'm not perfect and if I talk too loud or dance in the street. They don't live in that restriction. They've already lost it all. So think of the spiritual lesson they might be learning, the freedom of expansion to freely express. I don't know. Well, if you don't like that story, there's another story that I love, and it's my favorite story about poop. And I tell you, the original story talked about S-H-I-T, but for the sake of church and being polite, I changed it to poop. I really like that word. Do you like that word? Well, this was Charles Frazier. He wrote the book Cold Mountain, and it was made into a movie. And the movie wasn't necessarily my favorite movie, but I like the story that came from it. He said, I think there's a plan. There's a design for each and every one of us. You look at nature. Birds fly somewhere, pick up a seed, poop out the seed. The plant grows. Bird's got a job, poop's got a job, seed's got a job, and you and I have jobs. And who are we to judge, whether the bird that's flying or pooping or planting? What is the most important? All parts are needed. And who are we to judge? How do we stop living in judgment? And the only way I know of is when I fall into judgment, I have to know I can get up. And I have to immediately say, I could choose peace instead of this. And I'm embarrassed to admit, some days I don't. Until I'm so miserable, I realize I have to choose it. Together, I could choose peace instead of this. And then finally, the final thought about judgment. Let's talk about Judgment Day. Ooh, did you grow up scared of that final Judgment Day? Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, called it a boogaboo. He said there was a boogaboo when that idea came about. The translators of the authorized version of the American Standard Version of the New Testament are responsible for the great Judgment Day boogaboo. In every instance where judgment was mentioned by Jesus, he said, in a day of judgment. But the translators changed a to the, making the time of judgment appear a definite point in the future. Each day is the last judgment day, when we finally give up judging, and the final judgment day will end, the last judgment, when humanity quits judging each other and lets go of it completely. God doesn't judge. God is love. Love can't judge. It wouldn't be love anymore. The Course in Miracles reminds us the final judgment on the world contains no condemnation, for it sees the world as totally forgiven. Do I hear an amen?
Amen.
All right, let's take that into prayer. I could choose peace today. As I go around the world and see situations and people and hear viewpoints and see what's on the media, I can choose peace. I can release attachment to the appearance of things and simply choose another way. While not condoning it, I stand in release, in the freedom of acceptance of what is, free from judgment. And only peace can come forth. And in that centered state of peace, I make those wise decisions through discernment for right and perfect action for me today, right now, right here. I could choose peace instead of this. One more time together. I could choose peace instead of this. And so it is, so it truly is. Amen.